The fog clung to the English countryside like a shroud, enveloping Hargrove Manor in an eerie silence on that fateful autumn evening in 1933. Sir Reginald Hargrove, the reclusive industrialist whose fortunes were forged in the fires of the Great War, sat alone in his opulent study, a glass of port trembling in his gnarled hand. Suddenly, a guttural choke escaped his lips. The glass shattered on the Persian rug as he clutched his throat, eyes bulging in terror. Was it poison? A curse from his shadowed past? The household stirred to the sound of his final gasp. A death that whispered of secrets long buried, drawing the keen mind of Hercule Poirot into a web of deception. Chapter 1. The Shadowed Manor. The fog clung to the English countryside like a living thing, a damp gray shroud that muffled sound and swallowed light. It was the sort of fog that turned familiar landmarks into phantoms, that made even the oldest oaks seem to shift and lean like conspirators. On the evening of 17th October 1933, it pressed against the leaded windows of Hargrove Manor with a persistence that felt almost personal, as though the weather itself had been summoned to bear witness. Hargrove Manor stood on a low rise above the River Dart, 3 stories of blackened stone and crenellated parapets, a relic of the Tudor age that had been improved in the Georgian period with a portico of fluted columns and a balustrade that now sagged under the weight of ivy. The house had been built for defense, not comfort, its corridors twisted like the intestines of some great beast, and its chimneys, 12 in all, belched smoke into the fog with the sullen regularity of a dying man's breath. Locals called it the manor that swallowed secrets, and on this night it had swallowed one more. Inside the study, a single lamp burned on the vast mahogany desk. Its green glass shade cast a sickly pallor over the room, illuminating the rigid figure of Sir Reginald Hargrove. He sat bolt upright in his high-backed chair, one hand still clutching the stem of a crystal port glass that had fallen from his fingers and shattered on the Persian rug. The port had soaked into the weave like blood, dark and viscous. His other hand was pressed to his throat, fingers splayed as though trying to prise something invisible from his windpipe. His eyes, once the cold, calculating gray of a man who had sent thousands to their deaths in the trenches for profit, were wide and bulging, the pupils dilated to pinpricks. A thin line of foam, pink-tinged, had dried at the corner of his mouth. Death had not been gentle. The study door stood ajar. Beyond it, the grandfather clock in the hall struck 9 with a sound like a coffin lid closing. Footsteps, hesitant, then hurried, echoed along the flagstones. Mrs. Agnes Croft, the housekeeper, appeared first, her apron still dusted with flour from the kitchen. She was a woman of 50-odd years, broad-hipped and iron-gray, with the sort of face that had long ago settled into lines of perpetual disapproval. She took one look at her master and crossed herself, though she had not been to Mass since the armistice. "Sir Reginald?" Her voice cracked like a whip in the silence. No answer. She stepped closer, her sensible shoes crunching on the broken glass. "Sir Reginald." Behind her, Lady Eleanor Hargrove drifted into the room like a ghost in a negligee of dove-gray silk. She was 38, though grief and gin had begun to etch finer lines around her eyes. Her auburn hair, usually pinned in an elegant chignon, hung loose about her shoulders, and her bare feet left damp prints on the rug. She stared at her husband's corpse as though it were a painting she did not recognize. "He's dead," she said quite calmly. Then louder, "He's dead." The words unleashed chaos. Footsteps thundered from every direction. Victor Langston, Sir Reginald's business partner, burst in wearing a dinner jacket and a scowl. He was a tall man, lean as a greyhound, with a face that might have been handsome if not for the perpetual sneer that curled his upper lip. His cufflinks, onyx set in gold, flashed as he gestured. "Good God, Eleanor, what have you done?" "I? Lady Eleanor's voice rose to a shriek. "I found him like this." Miss Clara Beaumont, the secretary, appeared next, clutching a stenographer's notebook to her chest as though it were a shield. She was 24, slight, with mousy hair and eyes the color of weak tea. Her spectacles had slipped to the end of her nose, and she pushed them up with a trembling finger. "I was in the typing room," she stammered. I heard a sound like choking." Edmund Hargrove, the prodigal son, arrived last. He had clearly dressed in haste. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, his tie askew, and there was a faint smell of brandy and cigarette smoke about him. At 29, he bore little resemblance to his father beyond the same hawkish nose. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands unsteady. "Father?" He crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt beside the body. For a moment his face crumpled, not with grief but with something raw. Who did this? Mrs. Croft, ever practical, had already begun to herd the household staff into the corridor. "No one leaves," she barked. "Not until the police come. And someone fetch Dr. Hawthorne from the village." The police, when they arrived, were embodied by Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard, summoned by a frantic telephone call from Lady Eleanor. Japp was a squat, bulldog sort of man with a bowler hat perpetually clamped to his head and a mustache that looked as though it had been glued on by a child. He took one look at the scene and sighed. "Poison, I shouldn't wonder," he muttered to his sergeant, a gangly youth named Lemon. "These toffs always go in for the dramatic. Cyanide in the brandy, arsenic in the soup, mark my words." But it was not Japp who would solve the puzzle. By noon the next day, a telegram had been dispatched to a certain flat in Whitehaven Mansions, London. It read, "Hercule Poirot arrived at Hargrove Manor at precisely 3:17 p.m., stepping down from the Daimler with the dignity of a monarch alighting from a state carriage." He was a small man, neat as a pin, with a mustache of such magnificent proportions that it seemed to have a life of its own. His overcoat was of the finest vicuña, his spats immaculate, and his patent leather shoes gleamed despite the muddy drive. He carried a malacca cane with a silver head shaped like an egg, which he used not for support but for emphasis, tapping it against his palm as he surveyed the manor. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, tilting his head back to take in the façade. "A house of secrets, n'est-ce pas? The stones themselves, they whisper." Japp met him in the entrance hall, where suits of armor stood like silent sentinels. "Glad you could come, Poirot. This one's a proper mess. Sir Reginald Hargrove, war profiteer, munitions magnate, you know the type. Found dead in his study last night. Port glass smashed, foam at the mouth, the works. Doctor says arsenic, but slow acting. Took hours to kill him." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Hours, you say? Then the poison was administered earlier, perhaps in the decanter itself. And the household? 5 main players, give or take the servants. Lady Eleanor, the widow, bit of a lush, if you ask me. Victor Langston, business partner, slick as they come. Miss Clara Beaumont, secretary, mousy little thing. Edmund Hargrove, the son, wastrel and gambler. And Mrs. Croft, the housekeeper, been here since Noah." Poirot nodded, already cataloguing. "And the motives, they are?" "Thick as clotted cream. Sir Reginald was sitting on a fortune. Munitions contracts from the war, shady deals, the lot. Lady Eleanor gets the house and a tidy income if he dies. Langston was being squeezed out of the business. The son's up to his neck in debts. The secretary, well, who knows? And the housekeeper's loyal, but loyalty can turn sour." Poirot tapped his cane against the floor. "And the supernatural, mon ami? The whispers of ghosts?" Japp snorted. "Servants gossip. Moans from the attic, shadows in the corridors, load of rot. But it's got the household jumpy." Poirot's smile was thin. "The little gray cells, they do not believe in ghosts, but they believe in fear. And fear, Inspector, is a most potent weapon. He began his inspection in the study. The body had been removed to the village mortuary, but the room remained untouched. The port decanter stood on a silver tray, half empty, its cut-glass stopper lying beside it like a discarded crown. Poirot lifted it to his nose and inhaled delicately. "Almonds," he said. "Arsenic, oui, but not cyanide. The smell is faint but unmistakable." He examined the shattered glass, the rug, the desk. A leather-bound ledger lay open, its pages filled with columns of figures. Poirot's finger traced a line. Profits from 1917, most interesting. Shell casing sold to the War Office at triple the cost, and here, he tapped a notation, a payment to one VL. Victor Langston, perhaps? On the blotter, a single sheet of paper caught his eye. It was a letter, half-written, the ink still wet. "My dearest Eleanor, the time has come to unburden my soul. The secret I have carried since Ypres must be revealed. If not for justice, then for my own peace. Meet me in the study at 8. There is something you must see." R. Poirot folded the letter carefully and slipped it into his pocket. A confession, perhaps, or a trap. He moved to the fireplace. The ashes were cold, but among them lay a fragment of paper charred at the edges. Poirot retrieved it with tweezers. The words were barely legible. "Uncovered, ruin, all." "Someone burned evidence," he murmured, "but not thoroughly. The little gray cells, they are grateful." The study windows overlooked the rose garden, now sodden and bedraggled. Poirot opened the French doors and stepped onto the terrace. The fog had lifted slightly, revealing a set of footprints in the mud, small, delicate, leading from the garden to the poison shed at the far end. A woman's shoe, size 5, perhaps. Lady Eleanor? Miss Beaumont? He knelt, examining the soil. It was dark, rich, and clung to his gloved fingers. But beneath the surface something glinted, a button, pearl, with a thread of gray silk attached. Poirot pocketed it. Returning indoors, he found the household assembled in the drawing room under Japp's watchful eye. Lady Eleanor sat by the fire, a glass of sherry trembling in her hand. Victor Langston stood at the window, smoking a Turkish cigarette. Miss Beaumont perched on the edge of a chaise longue, twisting a handkerchief. Edmund Hargrove slouched in an armchair, a decanter of whiskey at his elbow. Mrs. Croft stood by the door, arms crossed. Poirot entered without ceremony. "Mesdames et messieurs," he announced, "Hercule Poirot is here. The truth, it will be revealed. But first, the questions." He began with Lady Eleanor. "Madame, you discovered the body?" She nodded, her eyes red-rimmed. "I was in the garden. The roses needed pruning. I came in through the terrace doors, and there he was." "And the letter? The one asking you to meet at 8? Her hand flew to her throat. "I never received it." Poirot turned to Victor Langston. "Monsieur, you argued with Sir Reginald yesterday?" Langston exhaled smoke. "Business. He accused me of cooking the books. I told him to go to hell." Miss Beaumont's voice was barely a whisper. "I was typing correspondence. I heard nothing until the end." Edmund laughed bitterly. "I was in London, losing at cards. Ask anyone at the Crimson Club." Mrs. Croft's lips thinned. "I was in the kitchen, but I heard things, moans, like a soul in torment." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "The attic, madame?" She hesitated. "Old pipes, or something else." Poirot clapped his hands. "Bon, the stage is set, the players assembled, and now the curtain rises on Act 1. As he turned to leave, a sound drifted down from above, a low, mournful wail that seemed to come from the very walls. The household froze. Even Japp looked uneasy. Poirot smiled. "The ghost of Hargrove Manor, perhaps? or merely the wind in the chimneys? We shall see. He paused at the door, tapping his cane. One thing more. No one leaves this house, not until Hercule Poirot has spoken. Chapter 2. Whispers from the Past. The library of Hargrove Manor was a cavern of mahogany and Morocco leather, its high windows curtained in bottle green velvet that had faded to the color of moss. Gas sconces hissed softly along the walls, throwing pools of amber light across shelves that groaned beneath the weight of centuries. The air carried the mingled scents of beeswax, cigar ash, and the faint, sweet rot of old paper. A fire crackled in the atom fireplace, but it did little to dispel the chill that seemed to seep from the very stones. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small, compact figure immaculate in a charcoal gray suit with a waistcoat of dove silk. His patent shoes reflected the flames like twin mirrors. He held the half-burned letter fragment between gloved fingers, tilting it toward the light as though it were a sacred relic. Uncovered, ruin, all. He read aloud, his voice soft but resonant. A message of desperation, n'est-ce pas? Or a warning. The hand is hurried, the ink blotted. Someone wrote this in haste, and someone else sought to destroy it. He laid the scrap upon the blotter of the great pedestal desk and turned to the assembled company. They sat in a semicircle of high-backed chairs, like defendants awaiting judgment. Lady Eleanor Hargrove occupied the central seat, her sherry replaced by black coffee that steamed untouched before her. Victor Langston leaned against a globe of the world, one hand in his pocket, the other turning a cigarette ceaselessly between his fingers. Miss Clara Beaumont sat primly on the edge of her chair, knees together, notebook closed upon her lap. Edmund Hargrove sprawled with calculated insolence, one leg hooked over the arm of his seat, a fresh whiskey in hand. Mrs. Croft stood behind them all, arms folded, her face a mask of stoic endurance. Inspector Japp hovered near the door, notebook in hand, his bowler hat now tucked beneath his arm. He looked, Poirot thought, like a man who had wandered into a cathedral and was unsure whether to genuflect or arrest someone. Poirot began without preamble. We shall proceed methodically. First, the victim. Sir Reginald Harg. He was not merely a wealthy man. He was a man with a past that bled into the present like ink through blotting paper. Tell me, Lady Eleanor, of your husband's nightmares. Lady Eleanor's fingers tightened around the coffee cup. He had not slept properly since the war. He would wake screaming of mud and shells and faces in the dark. He spoke of Ypres, of a decision made in 1917 that haunted him. He called it the uncovered secret. I thought it delirium. Delirium? Poirot's eyebrows arched. Or guilt. And you, madam, did you share this bed of nightmares? She flushed. Our bedrooms were separate these 5 years. He preferred solitude for his reflections. Victor Langston gave a short, humorless laugh. Reflections. That's one way to put it. Reginald was reflecting on how many men he'd sent to their graves with faulty shells. Shells he sold to the War Office at triple the price, knowing half would burst in the breach. The room stilled. Even the fire seemed to pause. Poirot's eyes gleamed. You speak with authority, Monsieur Langston. I was there, Langston said bitterly. Junior partner in Hargrove and Langston Munitions, I saw the ledgers, I saw the bribes to inspectors, I saw the telegrams from the front, casings defective, men dead. Reginald laughed, said it was the cost of doing business in wartime. And you, monsieur, did you laugh also? Langston's jaw tightened. I was 26, I needed the money, my brother... He stopped, crushed the cigarette in a crystal tray. My brother was at Passchendaele. One of those shells took his head clean off. Miss Clara Beaumont made a small, distressed sound. Edmund Hargrove raised his glass in mock toast. Too profiteering, Father's favorite vintage. Poirot ignored him. Continue, monsieur, the argument yesterday about what precisely? Reginald accused me of embezzlement. Said he'd found discrepancies in the accounts. I told him to look in the mirror if he wanted a thief. Langston's smile was thin. He threatened to ruin me. Said he had proof of my indiscretions. Indiscretions? Women, gambling, nothing that would interest Scotland Yard. Langston's eyes flicked to Miss Beaumont, who colored violently. Poirot turned to the secretary. Mademoiselle, you were Sir Reginald's confidant in business. Did you type these accusations? Miss Beaumont's voice was barely audible. I typed what I was told. Sir Reginald dictated a letter to his solicitor yesterday afternoon, something about revising his will. He was agitated. Agitated enough to mention this uncovered secret? She nodded. He kept saying, "It's time. The truth must out." He asked me to find certain documents from the war. They were in the attic safe. Poirot's mustache twitched. The attic, always the attic. And you, mademoiselle, what is your connection to Monsieur Langston? Her blush deepened to crimson. We are friends, Langston cut in smoothly. Miss Beaumont has been kind enough to listen to my troubles. Edmund Hargrove snorted. Friends? How touching. Tell me, Clara, did friendship extend to helping Victor cook the books? Edmund, Lady Eleanor's voice cracked like a whip. Poirot raised a hand. Patience, mes amis. The little gray cells require facts, not accusations. Monsieur Hargrove, your father disinherited you? Edmund's eyes were cold. 3 years ago. Said I was a disgrace. Cut me off without a shilling. I've been living on credit and charm ever since. He drained his glass. I was in London last night at the Crimson Club. Ask Tommy Wainwright. He'll vouch for me. Tommy Wainwright, Poirot repeated. A gentleman whose word is worth exactly the price of his next drink, I suspect. And you, Madam Croft, what did you hear in the attic? The housekeeper's lips thinned. Pipes, sir. Old houses creak. But you mentioned moans. Souls in torment. Mrs. Croft hesitated. I may have exaggerated. Grief does strange things. Poirot was not convinced. He moved to the bookshelves, running a gloved finger along the spines. War histories, memoirs, and here, he pulled down a slim volume bound in red leather. Sir Reginald's Private Journal, 1917, most interesting. He opened it at random. The handwriting was precise, almost architectural. 14th of March, 1917 contract signed with War Office for 50,000 shell casings. Cost to produce 2 Tardefors each, sold at 6 tonnes. Margin acceptable. Inspector Mallory asks questions, 500 quiets him. VL objects to quality controls. Told him sentiment has no place in profit. Poirot closed the journal. Sentiment has no place in profit. A philosophy, n'est-ce pas? But profit has a way of breeding enemies. He replaced the book and crossed to the fireplace. The ashes had been raked, but not thoroughly. With a silver fruit knife, he teased out another fragment. This one larger, the corner of a photograph. It showed a group of officers in a trench, their faces blackened with mud. On the back, in faded ink, Ypres, 1917, for R.H. Never forget. Poirot pocketed it. Memory is a double-edged sword. The interrogation continued. Lady Eleanor admitted to a row with her husband over money. He kept me on an allowance fit for a governess. I wanted to sell the London house. He refused. Victor Langston produced a pocket watch, gold, heavy, engraved with the same Masonic symbol Poirot had noticed on Sir Reginald's signet ring. A gift, he said curtly, from better days. Miss Beaumont's handbag yielded a diary, its pages filled with neat shorthand. Poirot deciphered a line. V says tonight, R must not suspect. She claimed it referred to a surprise birthday gift for Sir Reginald. Edmund's coat pockets contained a pawn ticket for a diamond tie pin, his mother's left to him in a previous will. Desperate measures, he shrugged. Mrs. Croft, pressed, revealed that she had seen a light in the attic at midnight. I thought it was Sir Reginald searching for his papers, but when I went up, nothing. Poirot listened, his head tilted like a bird of prey. When the last testimony was given, he clapped his hands once. Bon. We have motives in abundance, greed, revenge, fear, love perhaps, but motives are not proof. Proof lies in details. He moved to the French windows. The fog had returned, thicker than before, turning the garden into a gray void. Last night, someone entered this room after dinner. Someone poured poison into the decanter. Someone knew Sir Reginald's habit of taking a nightcap alone. Someone perhaps counted on the fog to cover their tracks. He opened the window. The cold rushed in, carrying the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves. On the terrace, the footprints he had noticed earlier were now blurred by rain, but the pearl button remained where he had left it, tucked beneath a stone urn. Poirot knelt, examining the ground. The soil here is heavy clay, it clings, yet the footprints were light, almost dainty. A woman, I think. But look. He pointed to a second set, deeper, leading toward the poison shed. A man, perhaps, returning later to retrieve something. Japp scratched his head. 2 people. Or one person wearing different shoes. The theater of misdirection, mon ami. Back inside, Poirot examined the decanter more closely. The arsenic had been introduced through the stopper. The inside rim bore faint white crystals. Clever, he murmured. The poison dissolves slowly. By the time Sir Reginald pours his glass, the deed is done. He turned to the desk. The ledger was still open to the page he had noticed earlier. But now, a fresh entry had been added in different ink. Payment to VL withheld pending investigation of fraud. Poirot's eyes narrowed. This was written after death. Someone seeks to cast blame. The clock struck 6. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows like a living thing. Poirot closed the ledger. We have established the stage, he said. Now we watch the actors, but first... He rang the bell. When the maid appeared, he requested tea and sandwiches. The little gray cells function best when nourished. As the tray was brought in, a sound drifted down from above, a low rhythmic thumping as though someone were dragging something heavy across the attic floor. The maid dropped a cup. It shattered on the parquet. Lady Eleanor went white. "The ghost," she whispered. Victor Langston laughed, but it sounded forced. "Old houses settling." Chapter 3. The Poisoned Chalice. Sir Reginald Hargrove lay beneath a sheet the color of old bone, his face a grotesque mask, lips blue, eyes staring at nothing. A crust of dried foam at one corner of his mouth like a macabre smile. The air reeked of carbolic, formaldehyde, and something sweeter, almonds. Dr. Hawthorne, the village surgeon, stood with rolled sleeves and a face the color of sweet. Inspector Japp hovered at his elbow, Bowler clamped beneath his arm. Hercule Poirot entered without ceremony, cane tapping the tiles like a judge's gavel. "Alors, doctor, the verdict?" Hawthorne pulled back the sheet. Arsenic, slow-acting, cumulative, ingested over several days, perhaps a week. The final dose was in the port, but the damage was done long before. Stomach contents: undigested pheasant, port, and enough white arsenic to kill a horse. Death between 8 and 9 p.m. Thursday. Poirot leaned closer. The eyes, pinpoint pupils. The foam, pink-tinged, classic, but the tongue... He lifted the jaw gently. Blackened at the tip. Not typical of arsenic alone. Something else? Hawthorne hesitated. Trace of belladonna, atropine perhaps, to dilate the pupils, mask the pinprick. Someone wanted us to think heart failure. Japp whistled. Clever beggar. Poirot's mustache twitched. Clever, oui, but not clever enough. The belladonna, where from? Garden shed, Hawthorne said. Deadly nightshade grows wild behind the manor. Berries crushed mixed with the arsenic. Slow poison, then a theatrical flourish. Poirot straightened. The chalice was poisoned twice, first to torment, then to kill. The killer is a psychologist. He turned to the tray of evidence, the shattered port glass, the decanter, now stoppered and sealed. A smear of dried blood on the rug. Not Sir Reginald's. Poirot scraped it with a scalpel. Human. Type O. Whose? Japp shrugged. We'll test the household. Poirot lifted the decanter to the light. Inside the neck, a faint white ring, crystals. Administered through the stopper. Dissolved slowly as the port was poured. The killer refilled the decanter nightly, adding a grain each time. Who had access? Mrs. Croft fills it, Japp said. But the study was locked. Poirot produced a wax impression from his pocket. Taken from the key in her apron. Someone borrowed it, repeatedly. They returned to the manor. The study had been sealed, but Poirot had the key. Inside, the port stain on the Persian rug had darkened to a sinister flower. He knelt, sniffed. Still almonds, but beneath, belladonna berries, crushed into the carpet. The killer stood here, grinding them underfoot to mask the scent. He opened the French windows. The garden was sodden, footprints blurred. But one set remained clear, small, narrow, leading from the terrace to the poison shed. Beside it, a single pearl button, dove gray. Poirot pocketed it. Size 5, Lady Eleanor's walking dress, but the heel marks are deep. Someone carrying weight. The dispatch box, perhaps? Japp scratched his head. Timeline's tight. Poison over days, then the final glass. No. The final glass was clean. Only belladonna to hasten the end. The arsenic had already done its work. The killer wanted a dramatic death. Witnessed. He moved. To the desk. The half-written letter to Eleanor lay where he had left it. But beneath the blotter, a fresh sheet, new ink. The secret dies with me. Burn everything. R. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Written after death. The hand is similar, but the pressure lighter. Forgery. He opened the ledger. A new entry dated Thursday, payment to CB, $5,000. Final. Clara Beaumont, Japp muttered. The secretary. Poirot nodded. The will was changed Wednesday. Clara knew. She typed it. They found Clara in the typing room, pale, spectacles fogged. Her fingers trembled over the keys. Mademoiselle, you were in here Thursday night? She nodded. Typing Sir Reginald's memoirs. He dictated until 7, then dismissed me. I heard choking. Later. Your room, may we see? She led them upstairs. The bedroom was small, neat. On the dresser, a tin of rat poison, half empty. For the cellar, she whispered. Poirot lifted it. Coarse crystals, matches the stomach contents, and this... He opened her diary. Coded entries. Got a confession, but the belladonna, garden shed. Who picked the berries? They descended to the shed. The door hung open. Inside, gardening gloves, secateurs, a basket of nightshade berries, freshly picked. On the bench, a mortar and pestle, stained purple. Footprints again, size 5 but lighter. Someone returning the tools. Poirot knelt. The berries were crushed here, then carried to the study in the decanter stopper. The killer wore Eleanor's shoes, stolen from the boot room. He stood. Clara poisoned slowly. But the belladonna, theatrical, swift, was added by another. Someone who wanted the death witnessed. They gathered the household in the drawing room. Lady Eleanor veiled, Victor Langston pacing, Edmund drunk, Mrs. Croft, stoic. Poirot laid the evidence on the table. The rat tin, the diary, the berry-stained mortar, the forged letter, the pearl button. Clara administered the arsenic, he began. Motive, the will, but the belladonna. He turned to Victor Langston. You picked the berries, your shoes, mud from the shed path. You added the final touch to hasten death, fearing Clara would crack. Langston sneered. Ridiculous. Poirot produced a berry from his pocket, crushed in Langston's handkerchief. Monogrammed, found in the study grate. Langston lunged. Japp restrained him. Clara poisoned the body, Poirot continued. Victor poisoned the mind, playing the ghost, ensuring Sir Reginald died in terror. A partnership. He turned to Eleanor. You knew nothing until the forged letter. You burned the real one. Eleanor nodded, tears falling. He was going to confess, ruin us all. Edmund laughed. And I thought I was the villain. Chapter 4, Echoes of Betrayal. The attic of Hargrove Manor was a cathedral of dust. Slates of moonlight slanted through a single dormer window, striping the floorboards in silver and shadow. Trusses arched overhead like the ribs of some fossilized beast. Cobwebs hung in ragged veils, trembling whenever the wind found a crack. The air tasted of camphor, rust, and the sweet decay of forgotten things. Hercule Poirot ascended the narrow servant's stair at precisely 10:17 p.m., lantern in one hand, Malacca cane in the other. Behind him came Inspector Japp, puffing like a kettle, and the five principals, Lady Eleanor in a sable coat, Victor Langston with a scowl, Miss Beaumont clutching her diary, Edmund Hargrove reeking of brandy, Mrs. Croft with a ring of keys that jingled like bones. Poirot paused on the landing. The attic, he announced, is the subconscious of the house. Here, secrets are stored like winter apples, until they rot. He pushed open the door. The hinges screamed. Inside, trunks and crates stood in crooked regiments, labeled in faded copperplate. Xmas 1897, Reggie's School, War Office Confidential. A dressmaker's dummy wore a moth-eaten ball gown. A child's rocking horse stared with one glass eye. At the far end, a black iron safe squatted beneath the eaves, its dial glinting like a cyclops. Poirot set the lantern on a crate. Mademoiselle Beaumont, you said Sir Reginald sought documents here. Show me. Clara stepped forward, knees trembling. He gave me the combination last week, said if anything happened, I was to burn them. She knelt, spun the dial. Left 17, right 33, left 9. The safe side open. Inside lay a tin dispatch box. Poirot lifted it with reverence. The lid was stenciled. Hargrove and Langston, restricted. He opened it. Bundles of yellowed letters tied with red tape. A photograph. Sir Reginald younger, arm in arm with a grinning officer. Victor Langston minus the sneer. A ledger, its pages dense with figures. And beneath, a single shell casing, brass dulled by time, stamped, defective, return to factory. Poirot held the casing aloft. Behold the fruit of betrayal. 100,000 such shells sold to the crown. 43% failed. 1,200 men killed by their own artillery, and here. He tapped the ledger. The profit, $187,000, adjusted for inflation, a king's ransom. Victor Langston's face was stone. I warned him, said the casings were substandard. He overruled me. Overruled? Poirot's voice cut like a scalpel. Or bribed? Your signature is on every requisition, monsieur. Langston's hand went to his pocket. I was a junior partner who received $10,000 in consulting fees. Poirot produced a bank draft from the box, drawn the day after the first battlefield reports. Lady Eleanor swayed. Reginald, a traitor? Traitor is a strong word, madam. Profiteer is more elegant. Poirot turned to Edmund. And you, monsieur, did you know your inheritance was built on blood? Edmund laughed, a cracked sound. I knew he was a bastard, didn't know he was a mass murderer. Mrs. Croft crossed herself. God rest those poor boys. Poirot replaced the items, closed the box. Sir Reginald intended confession. The half-written letter, the revised will. He meant to unburden his soul and disinherit all who profited. Someone learned of this and acted. He moved to a trunk labeled E.H., personal. Inside, love letters in a woman's hand, perfume long faded. A locket with a miniature of a young officer, not Sir Reginald. Poirot pocketed it. Madam, he said softly to Lady Eleanor, your affair with Captain Forsyth, did your husband know? Her gasp was a gunshot in the silence. How? The locket, the initials. The dates coincide with his visits to the manor in 1928. Poirot's eyes were gentle but relentless. Sir Reginald discovered it last month. Blackmail, perhaps, or grounds for divorce, leaving you penniless? I loved him, she whispered. Reginald would have ruined us both. Victor Langston stepped forward. Enough games, Poirot. If you're accusing, I accuse no one, yet. Poirot opened another crate. Inside, a gramophone, its horn cracked. Beside it, a wax cylinder labeled Effects, Haunted House. He wound the mechanism. A low moan issued forth, rising to a wail, identical to the ghost heard nights ago. Mrs. Croft flushed crimson. I found it in the cellar. Thought it might discourage intruders. Or create them, Poirot said. The supernatural is a convenient mask for the guilty. He knelt by the safe again. Beneath it, a floorboard was loose. Prying it up revealed a small cavity. Inside, a woman's kid glove stained with soil, and a glass vial empty, its label half scratched. Arsenic rat poison. Miss Beaumont fainted. Edmund caught her, smirking. Clara's vermin problem, apparently. Poirot held the vial to the light. Administered in the port over several evenings. Slow, painful, psychological torture before death. The killer wished Sir Reginald to suffer as those soldiers suffered. Lady Eleanor's voice was a thread. I keep arsenic in the garden shed for weeds. And your gloves, madame, they match this one, size 5, the footprints in the mud. I was pruning roses, she cried. Pruning at midnight? Poirot's tone was silk over steel. Victor Langston's hand was in his pocket again. This is absurd. Eleanor's no murderess. Perhaps not. But someone used her shed, her poison, her gloves. Poirot turned to Mrs. Croft. You have access to all keys. You heard the gramophone. You planted the Ouija board in the study on Midsummer. On whose orders? Japp barked. Mrs. Croft's eyes darted. No one's. I thought to frighten the master into confession. For the souls. Poirot shook his head. Amateurs. The professional leaves fewer traces. He moved to the dormer window. Outside, the fog swirled like milk in water. On the sill, a fresh scratch. Nail marks, as though someone had clung there watching. Someone observed our little drama from above, Poirot murmured. But the attic ladder was drawn up. How? Edmund pointed to a skylight in the roof. Servants' access. Leads to the roof. Poirot opened it. Cold air rushed in. On the lead guttering, a smear of mud and a single pearl button twin to the one from the terrace. 2 buttons, Poirot said. One below, one above. The same garment torn in haste. The watcher was among us and fled across the roof. He closed the skylight. The net tightens, but one piece is missing. He returned to the dispatch box, removed the shell casing. Inside rolled tight a final document. A new will dated 3 days ago. Sir Reginald left everything to a military charity, except 5,000 to CB, in gratitude for loyalty. Clara Beaumont. Chapter 5. Tangled alibis. The morning room at Hargrove Manor was a confection of Wedgwood blue and gilt, its tall windows overlooking the sodden rose garden where the fog had finally burned away to a thin, reluctant mist. Sunlight, pale and watery, slid across the parquet like a guilty thing. A long walnut table had been laid for breakfast, but the silver chafing dishes stood untouched. The scent of kedgeree and deviled kidneys warred with the sharper tang of fear. Hercule Poirot entered at 9 o'clock sharp, his step light, his mustache waxed to lethal points. He carried the 3 pearl buttons in a small morocco case which he placed beside his plate with the reverence of a priest laying out relics. "Mesdames et messieurs," he announced, "we resume. The attic has spoken. Now the alibis must answer." Inspector Japp followed, notebook ready, flanked by 2 constables who looked as though they had slept in their uniforms. The household filed in, Lady Eleanor in black crepe, eyes swollen, Victor Langston in a charcoal suit, tie askew, Miss Clara Beaumont pale as parchment clutching a fresh notebook, Edmund Hargrove unshaven, a bruise blooming on his cheekbone, Mrs. Croft ramrod straight, apron starched to cardboard. Poirot poured himself coffee, black, no sugar, and began. "First, the night of the murder. Lady Eleanor, you claim the garden. Yet the footprints from the terrace to the poison shed are size 5, heel marks deep. Pruning roses at 8:30 in fog? Show me your secateurs." Lady Eleanor's hand trembled as she produced a pair of garden shears from her reticule. The blades were clean, but the handles bore fresh scratches, and a flake of dried mud that matched the shed path. I went earlier," she stammered, "to fetch twine." "Twine for roses in October?" Poirot's eyebrow arched. "And your gloves, madame, where are they?" "Lost," she whispered. "In the fog." Poirot opened the morocco case. One glove was found beneath the attic safe, stained with arsenic and garden soil. The buttons match. Your dove-gray walking dress. 3 missing, 3 recovered. Explain. Lady Eleanor's cup rattled in its saucer. I was in the attic yesterday, searching for my mother's locket. The glove must have caught on a nail." "Convenient," Poirot murmured. He turned to Victor Langston. "Monsieur, your alibi is the London train arriving 7:42 p.m. Yet the station master remembers no such passenger. And your ticket," he produced a crumpled stub, "is dated yesterday, purchased at 6:15 a.m. from Totnes. You never left Devon." Langston's jaw worked. "I missed the train, took a later one." "Which later one? The last departs at 5:58. Poirot's voice was silk. "You were seen, monsieur, by the gardener cycling from the village at 7:10. Mud on your shoes, a parcel under your arm, the gramophone cylinder, perhaps?" Langston's hand went to his pocket, then froze as Japp's constable stepped forward. Miss Clara Beaumont burst into tears. "It was me. I asked Victor to fetch the cylinder. I thought, if Sir Reginald heard the moans, he'd confess for the soldiers." Poirot patted her hand. "Calm yourself, mademoiselle. Confession is good for the soul, but not yet for the gallows." He produced her diary, open to the coded page. "V says tonight. R must not suspect." "This refers to the cylinder?" She nodded miserably. "Victor recorded it in London. Haunted house effects. I played it through the attic vent." "Clever," Poirot said. "But the vial in the attic. Your fingerprints, mademoiselle. Arsenic." "I keep rat poison in my room," she cried. "The cellar is infested. Ask Mrs. Croft." The housekeeper inclined her head. "True. But the vial in the attic was from the garden shed, Lady Eleanor's supply." Edmund Hargrove laughed, a harsh bark. "So the merry widow poisons the port, Clara plays ghost, Victor supplies the sound effects. And I'm the only one with a real alibi, losing 50 guineas at the Crimson Club." Poirot turned to him. Your alibi, monsieur, is tissue paper. Tommy Wainwright has been arrested twice for forging betting slips, and this," he produced the pawn ticket, "is for your mother's diamonds pawned yesterday at 11 a.m. in Exeter. You returned by the 12:45 train. Plenty of time to reach the manor by dusk." Edmund's smirk faltered. "I needed cash. Father's death solves that. Or complicates it," Poirot said. "The new will leaves you nothing." He moved to the sideboard where the post had been laid. A single letter, addressed in Sir Reginald's hand, postmarked the day before his death. Poirot slid it open. "To the War Office, I confess to the deliberate sale of defective munitions 1917-18, enclosed ledger correspondence. My partners VL and others complicit. Let justice be done. R. Hargrove." Poirot held it up. "Posted at 4 p.m., intercepted by the killer, or never sent?" Jap whistled. "That's motive for the lot of them." Poirot nodded. "But the poison was administered over days. The killer planned ahead. Who had access to the decanter?" Mrs. Croft raised her hand. "I filled it daily, but it was locked in the study." "With a key," Poirot said, producing a ring. "This one taken from your apron pocket last night. Wax impression on the bow, made recently." Mrs. Croft went white. I lost it. Days ago?" "Found," Poirot said, "in the attic beneath the gramophone, along with a chocolate wrapper. Arsenic-laced chocolates planted in Monsieur Edmund's room to frame him." Edmund lunged. "You bitch!" Jap restrained him. "Easy, sir," Poirot continued. "The chocolates were a diversion, the real poison port, but the decanter was tampered with twice. First dose, Monday to sicken. Second, Wednesday to kill. Who benefited from delay?" He paced. "Lady Eleanor gains freedom. Victor stops exposure. Clara secures her legacy. Edmund escapes debts. Mrs. Croft, loyalty or something deeper?" He stopped before the housekeeper. "You have served this family 30 years, yet your nephew, Private Croft, 2nd Devons, was killed at Ypres by a Hargrove shell." Mrs. Croft's face crumpled. "He was 19. "Revenge?" Poirot asked gently. She shook her head. "I wanted confession, not murder." Poirot believed her. He turned to the company. "The killer used psychology, ghosts to unsettle, chocolates to misdirect. Buttons torn deliberately, one on the terrace, one on the roof, one in the corridor. To suggest flight, panic, multiple culprits." He opened the Morocco case. "But the thread on all 3 buttons is identical. Silk from Selfridge's Dove Gray, lot number 478. Lady Eleanor's dress bought last month. The glove, the poison, the footprints, all hers, yet—" He paused. "Yet the attic safe was opened after we left, the dispatch box taken. Lady Eleanor was under guard, so—" The door burst open, the gardener cap in hand. "Beg pardon, sir. Found this in the compost heap." He held out the dispatch box. Lid pried, contents gone. Poirot smiled. "The killer panics. But why burn the evidence now when the confession is already mailed?" He turned to Clara. "Mademoiselle, you intercepted the letter. You have Sir Reginald's seal in your desk. You forged the postmark." Clara fainted again. Victor Langston made for the door. Jap's constable blocked him. Poirot raised a hand. "Patience. The web is complex. Lady Eleanor poisoned the port. Motive, freedom. Clara played the ghost. Motive, legacy. Victor supplied the cylinder. Motive, silence. Edmund planted the chocolates. Motive, to frame his stepmother. Mrs. Croft lost the key, perhaps deliberately." Chapter 6. Hidden Alliances. By the time Poirot, Jap, and the constables reached the skylight, the fog had returned in earnest, thick, wet, and luminous under a low moon. The lead guttering glistened like snail trails. A single skylight stood propped open, a woman's shoe, Dove-gray kid, pearl button missing, lay on its side, heel snapped clean off. Poirot climbed through first, lantern swinging. The roof sloped gently toward the chimneys, each stack exhaling pale ghosts of smoke. Footprints, small, frantic, led toward the north parapet. A smear of blood, fresh and bright, marked the tiles. "Careful," Poirot warned. "The killer is wounded. Desperation makes the cat climb higher." Jap puffed behind him. "Who is it? Eleanor? Clara?" "Patience, mon ami. The dress unravels, but the thread must lead us." They followed the prints. At the parapet, the trail ended in a scuffed semicircle. Below, 30 feet down, the gravel carriage sweep lay empty. No body, no ladder. Poirot knelt. A scrap of dove-gray silk fluttered from a gargoyle's mouth. He plucked it free. Torn in flight, but no fall. Therefore, he shone the lantern along the gutter. A narrow catwalk, hidden by the parapet, ran the length of the roof to the servants' wing. "Clever," he murmured. "An escape within an escape." They crossed the catwalk. It ended at a dormer window, unlatched. Inside, the old nursery, untouched since Edmund's childhood. Rocking horse, toy fort, a faded map of the empire pinned to the wall. On the floorboards, a trail of blood droplets led to a wardrobe. Jap drew his whistle. Poirot raised a finger. Doucement, he opened the wardrobe. Empty, save for a gray dress, crumpled, one sleeve ripped, buttons gone. Blood on the cuff, and beneath it the dispatch box, lid forced, contents scattered. The confession letter, the ledger, the photograph of young Langston and Hargrove, all soaked in port wine, useless as evidence. Poirot lifted the dress. "Size 5, Lady Eleanor's." "But the blood is fresh. Whose?" A groan from the shadows. Behind the rocking horse, Miss Clara Beaumont lay curled, temple bleeding, wrists bound with her own stockings. "Mon Dieu!" Poirot knelt. "Mademoiselle, who did this?" Her eyes fluttered. She said I knew too much, the will, the poison." "Lady Eleanor?" Clara nodded, tears cutting channels through dust on her cheeks. "She came for the box. I followed. She hit me, pushed me toward the edge. I grabbed her dress." Jap untied her. "Where did she go?" Clara pointed to a tiny door in the wainscoting, servant's passage to the main stair. Poirot stood. The alliance's fracture. Clara was accomplice, then threat. But the poison, days in the port. That required access, planning. Eleanor alone. He examined the scattered papers. The confession letter was torn in half, the ledger's profit page missing. Selective destruction. Someone still protects a secret. Footsteps echoed below, rapid, descending. Jap's constables thundered after them. Poirot held back. "No. Let her run. The manor is a cage. She will circle to the one place she believes safe." He led them down the servants' stair, past the kitchen where Mrs. Croft was brewing tea with shaking hands, past the gun room where Edmund Hargrove stood at the window, whiskey forgotten, staring into the fog. "She's gone to the study," Edmund said dully. "Always does when cornered. Father's sanctuary." The study door was locked. Jap put his shoulder to it. Once, twice. Wood splintered. Inside, the room was as they had left it. Port stain on the rug, decanter gleaming. But the French windows stood open, fog drifted in like incense. Lady Eleanor stood at the desk, back to them, a revolver in her hand. Sir Reginald Service Webley. On the blotter lay the missing ledger page and a single pearl button. "Stay back," she said without turning. Her voice was steady now, almost regal. "It ends here." Poirot stepped forward. "Madame, the dress is in the nursery. The blood is Clara's. You have run far enough." She laughed, a broken sound. "Far? I have been running since 1917. Reginald's war, his profits, his guilt. He laid it all at my feet. Keep the secret, Eleanor, or we lose everything. I kept it, and he rewarded me with separate bedrooms and a lover's locket he found in my drawer. She turned. Her face was streaked with tears, but her eyes burned. Then the will, everything to charity, 5,000 to his little typist. I was to be cast out like a mistress. So I poisoned the port, slowly, let him feel the shells bursting in his veins. Poirot nodded. And Clara? She suspected, saw me in the shed. I paid her silence with promises, then with fear. The ghost recordings were her idea. Victor supplied the cylinder. He wanted the confession destroyed to save his reputation. We were convenient allies. Until the will, Poirot said. Then you became liabilities. Eleanor raised the revolver, not at them but to her own temple. I won't hang, not for him. Jap lunged. Poirot was faster. His cane hooked her wrist. The gun spun across the rug. She collapsed, sobbing. As the constables cuffed her, Poirot picked up the ledger page. It detailed a single payment, $5,000 to VL on final share. But the ink was fresh, written yesterday. He turned to the door. Victor Langston stood there, pale, hands raised. I heard the shot. You wrote this, Poirot said, holding up the page. After death? To implicate yourself or to bargain? Langston's smile was thin. Insurance. If Eleanor talked, I'd claim we acted together. Shared guilt, lighter sentence. But she moved faster than I planned. Poirot shook his head. Hidden alliances, monsieur. You supplied the cylinder, yes. But the poison. Clara's vial was empty, rat poison, not arsenic. The real poison came from the shed, Eleanor's domain. He opened the decanter. A faint almond scent still lingered. Microscopic residue on the stopper, your fingerprint, monsieur, beneath hers. You added, the final dose Wednesday night while she played ghost in the attic. You feared her confession would drag you down. Langston's shoulders sagged. She was unraveling. I had to finish it. Jap snapped cuffs on him. Conspiracy to murder. Both of you. Poirot knelt beside Eleanor. Madame, the supernatural was your mask, but the true ghost was guilt. Yours, his, everyone's. She looked up, eyes hollow. Will they hang me? England no longer hangs women for poison, Poirot said gently. But you will live with the shells, every night. He stood. Outside, the fog began to lift, revealing the rose garden, petals bruised, thorns glistening. On the path, the final pearl button lay, trodden into the mud. Chapter 7. The Attic Revelation. After the arrests, Hargrove Manor seemed to exhale, but the air remained thick with residue. Guilt, gun oil, and the faint almond ghost of arsenic. Dawn had come pale and reluctant, the fog burned off to a hard, metallic sky. In the entrance hall, the grandfather clock ticked like a metronome counting down to judgment. Hercule Poirot stood beneath the chandelier, hands clasped behind his back, surveying the household one final time before the police vans departed. Lady Eleanor and Victor Langston had been taken at first light. Miss Clara Beaumont, bandaged and trembling, was under guard in the morning room. Edmund Hargrove nursed a final whiskey in the library. Mrs. Croft moved silently through the corridors, laying dust sheets over furniture that would never again feel Sir Reginald's weight. Yet Poirot was not satisfied. The little gray cells, they buzzed like bees in a jar. Something, une petite chose, remained out of place. He climbed the main staircase, cane tapping each step in perfect rhythm. At the first landing, he paused, studying the portrait of Sir Reginald in his wartime colonel's uniform, eyes cold, mouth set, the same expression he had worn in death. Poirot tilted his head. You kept one secret too many, mon ami. He continued upward past the second floor to the narrow attic stair. The door stood ajar, a wedge of shadow spilling onto the runner. Inside, the attic was exactly as they had left it. Safe open, dispatch box gone, rocking horse staring with its single glass eye. but the air felt disturbed, a draft where none should be. Poirot entered alone. He moved methodically, lantern unlit, eyes adjusting to the gloom. The floorboards creaked under his patent shoes. He knelt by the safe, ran a gloved finger along the dial. The combination, 1733-9, had been scratched faintly into the brass as though someone had spun it in panic. He opened the safe again. Empty, yes, but the back panel was loose. A gentle push and it swung inward on concealed hinges, revealing a narrow cavity. Inside, a second smaller box, rosewood, inlaid with mother-of-pearl. Poirot lifted it out. The lock was child's play. Inside lay a single object, a brass shell casing, smaller than the one in the study, its primer blackened by firing, etched along the base in tiny, precise letters. For R.H., never forget, M.C. Poirot's breath caught. M.C., not Victor Langston, not any partner named in the ledgers. He turned the casing. On the reverse, a date. 14th of March, 1917, the same day the journal recorded the first defective shipment. He pocketed the casing and closed the false panel. Then he noticed the floorboard, the one he had pried up yesterday. It was nailed back down hastily with fresh iron tacks. He produced a penknife, levered it free. Beneath, not the glove or vial, but a folded sheet of notepaper, heavy cream stock, Hargrove crest embossed. The ink was fresh, the hand hurried but familiar. If you find this, the game is over. I acted alone. Eleanor is innocent of the final dose. The poison was mine, bought in Exeter under false name. I could not let the secret die with him. Forgive me. C.B. Poirot read it twice. Clara Beaumont. A confession or another layer of misdirection? He stood, eyes sweeping the attic. The gramophone still sat in its crate, horn cracked. But the wax cylinder was gone. He opened the lid. Inside, a second cylinder unlabeled. He wound the mechanism. A voice, male, cultured, trembling, issued forth. The recording clicked off. Victor Langston's voice unmistakable, but the date scratched on the cylinder. 12th of October, 1933, 4 days before the murder. Poirot's mustache twitched. Blackmail or rehearsal? He moved to the dormer window. The skylight was closed, but the latch had been forced, scratches fresh. On the sill, a smear of dried blood, Clara's from last night. But beneath it, something glinted. A sixth pearl button, larger than the others, mother of pearl, engraved with a tiny crest, not from Eleanor's dress. Poirot turned it over. The crest, a lion rampant, Hargrove family, but the junior branch. Edmonds. He descended to the nursery. The wardrobe stood open, the gray dress gone, taken by the police as evidence. But on the floor, half hidden under the rocking horse, a single white kid glove, right hand monogrammed E.H., stained with port, not blood. And inside the cuff, a folded slip. Meet me attic, midnight, bring the casing. V. Victor's handwriting. But the glove was Eleanor's. A plant or a double bluff? Poirot's mind raced. He returned to the main stair, pausing at the portrait. Sir Reginald's eyes seemed to follow him. He reached up, pressed the frame. It swung outward on silent hinges, revealing a narrow recess. Inside, a leather pouch. He opened it. A revolver, Webley Makerfor fully loaded, and a photograph, Sir Reginald and a young woman, not Eleanor, arms entwined, dated 1916, on the back, "To my darling M.C. forever." M.C., Clara's mother, or another? Footsteps behind him. Mrs. Croft, eyes red-rimmed, carrying a tray of tea things. "You shouldn't be up here, sir. The police said—" Poirot turned. "Madame, you have served this family 30 years. Yet your nephew died by a Hargrove shell. You planted the Ouija board, the gramophone. On whose orders?" She set the tray down, hands steady now. "No one, sir. I wanted the truth. For Tommy." "And the confession note in the floorboard?" Her eyes widened. I never—" Poirot held up the note. Clara's hand, But the paper is from your stationery, madame. The crest is faint, but there. You forged it. Mrs. Croft sank onto a chair. She came to me crying. Said Lady Eleanor forced her. I thought to protect the girl. She's no killer. Poirot nodded slowly. And the casing in the safe? The one with MC? Mrs. Croft's voice dropped to a whisper. Miss Clara's mother, Sir Reginald's mistress, died in childbirth 1909. Clara never knew. He kept the casing as penance. One shell that did fire true killed a German officer. Said it balanced the ledger. Poirot closed the portrait. The ledger of the soul is never balanced, madame. He descended to the study. The police had sealed it, but the French windows were unlatched. Inside, the port stain had darkened to rust. On the desk, a fresh sheet of paper, Clara's confession, rewritten in Poirot's absence. I lied. Victor added the final dose. I only played the ghost. Forgive me. The secret destroyed us all. Poirot folded it. Another confession. The house was drowning in them. He opened the decanter. Empty now, but the stopper, inside a faint white residue. He scraped it with a fingernail, tasted it. Not arsenic, sugar. His eyes widened. The final dose, placebo. The arsenic had killed Sir Reginald days earlier. The final dose was theater. He rang the bell. Japp appeared, harassed. Poirot, the vans are waiting. Release Lady Eleanor and Monsieur Langston, Poirot said calmly. The true killer remains. Japp stared. You've gone mad. Chapter 8. Gathering Suspicions. 4 walls of damask and gilt, a fireplace roaring like a furnace, and yet the air was brittle, ready to snap. Every tick of the ormolu clock on the mantel sounded like a gavel. Outside, November rain lashed the windows in diagonal sheets, turning the rose garden into a gray blur. Hercule Poirot stood before the marble chimney-piece, hands clasped behind his back, the very picture of calm. Around him, the remnants of the household sat in a ragged circle. Lady Eleanor, wrists raw from cuffs now removed. Victor Langston, tie askew, eyes bloodshot. Miss Clara Beaumont, bandaged and flanked by 2 constables. Edmund Hargrove, sober for once, knuckles white on the arms of his chair. Mrs. Croft, apron folded in her lap like a white flag. Inspector Japp hovered by the door, notebook open, pencil poised. Poirot began without ceremony. Mesdames et messieurs, the attic has spoken its final word. The shell casing, the hidden compartment, the sugar in the decanter, tout est clair, but clarity is not the same as proof. Proof must be demonstrated. Therefore, we gather the suspicions, we weigh them, and we let the guilty condemn themselves. He produced the brass casing, the small one etched MC, and laid it on the tea table beside the 5 pearl buttons, the forged confession notes, the gramophone cylinder, and the sugar-crusted stopper. Item 1, he said, tapping the casing. A keepsake from 1917, fired true unlike its brothers, a token of penance or of paternity. Mademoiselle Beaumont, you are Sir Reginald's natural daughter. He acknowledged you with £5,000, but not with his name. Resentment, oui? Clara's chin lifted. He owed me a lifetime. Item 2. Poirot lifted the buttons. From Lady Eleanor's dress, torn deliberately, one on the terrace, one on the roof, one in the corridor, one in the nursery, one in the study, a trail of breadcrumbs. But the 6th button, he produced the larger crested one, from Monsieur Edmund's smoking jacket, planted to implicate him. Why? Edmund snorted. Because I'm the obvious wastrel. Item 3, the gramophone cylinder. Poirot wound it. Victor Langston's voice filled the room. I'll see you in hell. Langston flinched. Blackmail. I recorded it to frighten him into silence. Item 4, the sugar stopper. The final dose, harmless. The real arsenic was administered over 7 days, a grain at a time, in the port. Only someone with nightly access to the study could manage it. He turned to Mrs. Croft. You filled the decanter daily. You had the key. The housekeeper's lips trembled. I served, sir. I never... Item 5. Poirot held up the forged confession notes. 3 versions, each implicating another. Clara's hand, but Mrs. Croft's stationery. A collaboration born of pity and fear. Mrs. Croft bowed her head. She's just a girl. Poirot's voice softened. Loyalty is admirable, madam, but it blinds. He paced, cane tapping. Now the psychology. The killer needed Sir Reginald terrified before he died. Hence the ghost, Clara's recordings played through the attic vent. Hence the chocolates, arsenic-laced, planted in Edmund's room to cast suspicion. Hence the buttons, torn from Eleanor's dress while she slept, drugged with laudanum from the medicine chest. Lady Eleanor gasped. I thought I'd been sleepwalking. Item 6. Poirot stopped before Clara. You learned the safe combination from Sir Reginald, in case anything happens. You stole the dispatch box, soaked the contents in port to destroy them. You wounded yourself on the roof to appear victim. You forged the confessions to fracture alliances. Clara's eyes blazed. He promised me the world, then left me scraps. Victor Langston leaned forward. She came to me, frantic, said Eleanor was poisoning him. I gave her the cylinder, thought it would force a confession, not murder. Lady Eleanor laughed, a brittle sound. I was poisoning him, slowly with sleeping draughts, to keep him weak while I searched for the will. But arsenic? Never. Edmund slammed his glass down. And I planted the chocolates, yes, to frame her. Thought if she swung I'd inherit, but I never touched the port. Poirot raised a hand. Silence. The pieces fit, but one is missing. He crossed to the fireplace, lifted the poker, and struck the marble hearth. Clang. A panel slid aside, revealing a tiny recess. Inside, a glass vial full of white powder labeled in Clara's neat hand. Arsenic. Final dose. Clara lunged. That's not... Jap caught her. Easy, miss. Poirot held the vial to the light. Purchased in Exeter under the name Mrs. C. Beaumont, your mother's maiden name. You kept it as insurance. If the slow poison failed, you had a swift end. He turned to the room. The killer is Clara Beaumont. Motive, betrayal by her father. Method, cumulative poisoning, misdirection, forged evidence. Accomplices Mrs. Croft out of pity, Victor out of fear, Edmund out of greed, Eleanor out of desperation, but only one hand poured the grains. Clara sagged in the constable's grip. He sat there every night drinking his port, writing his confession. I watched through the keyhole. He never saw me, his daughter. I added a little more each time. He began to cough, to clutch his throat. On the 7th night he looked up, saw me. Clara, he whispered, forgive me. Then he died. Silence broken only by rain. Poirot's voice was gentle. You wanted him to know. She nodded, tears falling. I wanted him to see me. Mrs. Croft wept openly. I should have stopped her. Victor Langston stared at the floor. I thought it was Eleanor. Edmund laughed, hollow. We all poisoned him in our way. Poirot replaced the vial in the recess, closed the panel. The suspicions are gathered. The guilty stands revealed. Justice, she is blind, but not deaf. She has heard every whisper. He turned to Jap. Take her. The others. Accessory after the fact. The Crown will decide. As Clara was led away, she paused before Poirot. Will they hang me? Chapter 9. The final deduction rain had ceased. Pale winter sunlight now slanted through the tall windows, laying cold bars across the turkey rug. Every chair was occupied, every face turned toward the small Belgian who stood at the hearth like a conductor before a silent orchestra. The fire had burned low. Only a single log glowed, pulsing like a dying heart. Hercule Poirot waited until the last constable closed the door. Then he spoke, voice clear, precise, carrying to the furthest corner. Mesdames et messieurs, the moment of truth arrives. You have confessed in fragments, Eleanor to sleeping draughts, Victor to the cylinder, Edmund to the chocolates, Mrs. Croft to the forged note, Clara to everything and nothing. But confession is not deduction. Deduction is order imposed upon chaos. And order, enfin, I give you. He placed 6 objects on the tea table in a perfect line. The small brass shell casing, MC. The vial of arsenic, full. The sugar-crusted stopper. The 6 pearl buttons. The gramophone cylinder, Langston's threat. A single sheet of cream notepaper, blank. Poirot lifted the casing. Fact 1. Clara Beaumont is Sir Reginald's illegitimate daughter. Proof. The photograph in the portrait recess, the dates, the £5,000 bequest. Motive established. He set it down, lifted the vial. Fact 2. This arsenic was never used. Purchased in Exeter, yes, but the poison in the port was rat poison, coarse, impure, from the cellar tin. Clara's fingerprints on the tin, not the vial. The vial is theatre. Clara started to speak. A constable's hand stilled her. Poirot took the stopper. Fact 3. The final dose was sugar. Sir Reginald died Wednesday night, not Thursday. The Thursday glass was clean, doctored only with sweetness. Someone wished us to believe the murder continued after death. He laid the buttons in a row. Fact 4. 5 from Eleanor's dress, 1 from Edmund's jacket. All torn after the murder between midnight and dawn Thursday. The dress was in the nursery wardrobe, locked. Only one person had the key. He looked at Mrs. Croft. She paled. Poirot lifted the cylinder. Fact 5. Victor's voice, recorded 12th October. But the gramophone in the attic played Clara's voice, higher, younger, on a second cylinder now destroyed. Victor supplied the machine, Clara supplied the performance. Langston swore under his breath. Poirot took the blank notepaper. Fact 6. Every confession was written on this stock, Mrs. Croft's private stationery, kept in the housekeeper's pantry. The forgeries were collaborative, but the hand is Clara's. She dictated. Mrs. Croft supplied paper and pity. He turned the paper over. On the reverse, faint indentations from a previous sheet, visible only in the sunlight. Poirot held it to the window. I will watch him die. Then I will watch them hang. CB. The room froze. Poirot's voice was soft steel. The final deduction. Clara Beaumont poisoned her father over 7 nights using cellar rat poison in the port. She staged the ghost to torment him. She planted the chocolates to frame Edmund. She tore the buttons to implicate Eleanor. She forged the confessions to scatter blame. She wounded herself on the roof to appear victim. And when the dispatch box threatened exposure, she destroyed it with port, not to hide the war crime, but to hide her crime. Clara laughed, high, brittle. Prove it, Poirot smiled. With pleasure. He crossed to the mantel, pressed a concealed panel. A drawer slid open, inside a second gramophone cylinder, intact. He wound the machine. Sir Reginald's voice, faint, gasping, filled the room. Clara, my girl, the shells, forgive. The will all to you. If you burn the... The recording ended in a choke. Poirot stopped the machine. Hidden in the clock mechanism, where Clara placed it before the poison took effect. Sir Reginald, in his final lucidity, recorded a new will, oral but witnessed by the machine. He intended to disinherit the charity, leave everything to his daughter, if she destroyed the war evidence. She chose murder instead. Clara lunged, screaming. He lied. Always lies. Japp wrestled her down. Clara Beaumont, I arrest you for the murder of Sir Reginald Hargrove. Poirot raised a hand. One moment. He turned to the others. The rest of you, accessories. Eleanor, the sleeping draughts. Victor, the cylinder. Edmund, the chocolates. Mrs. Croft, the forgeries. You danced to her tune, believing you protected yourselves. Instead, you built her gallows. Eleanor wept silently. Victor stared at the floor. Edmund laughed, broken. Mrs. Croft crossed herself. Poirot addressed Clara. You wanted him to see you. He did, in the end, and he forgave, but forgiveness is not yours to refuse. Clara sagged. I wanted him to suffer. He suffered, Poirot said. As you will. Every night the shells will burst in your dreams. He turned to Jap. Take them all. The crown will sort the degrees. Chapter 10. The secret unveiled Hargrove Manor stood hollowed, windows blind, chimneys cold. Only the rose garden remained defiant, one blood-red bloom heavy with rain nodding against the stone. The gravel sweep bore the black scars of tire tracks. The front door hung ajar like a slack mouth. Hercule Poirot lingered on the portico, overcoat buttoned to the throat, Malacca cane tapping a slow farewell. Inspector Jap waited by the Daimler, bowler in hand, breath fogging in the noon chill. All tidy, Poirot? Tidy enough, mon ami. The guilty are bound for Exeter. The innocent, he glanced back at the house, are free to carry their ghosts. Mrs. Croft appeared in the doorway, shawl about her shoulders, a small valise at her feet, 30 years of service reduced to one bag. You'll testify, madam, Poirot said gently. For leniency. Clara will need it. She nodded, eyes dry now. I kept her secret, sir. Now I'll keep her alive. Edmund Hargrove emerged next, hatless, coat unbuttoned despite the cold. He carried nothing. Everything's yours now, cousin, he told the empty air. The house, the debts, the blood. He laughed, a cracked sound, and walked down the drive without looking back. Lady Eleanor followed, veiled in black, a single pearl brooch at her throat, her mother's, not Reginald's. Victor Langston supported her elbow. His own cuffs were empty of onyx. They climbed into a waiting taxi without a word. Poirot watched them go. Then he turned to the rose. He knelt, gloved fingers brushing the petals. Beneath the bloom, half buried in mud, lay the 7th pearl button, smaller than the rest, mother of pearl, cracked clean through. He lifted it, turned it in the light. Sept boutons, he murmured. 7 for 7 deadly nights. He slipped it into his waistcoat pocket beside the brass casing. Jap cleared his throat. The yard's satisfied, slow arsenic over 7 days. Clara's prints on the rat tin, the decanter, the key. The oral will on the cylinder, coroners calling it binding. She'll hang, Poirot, mitigating blood tie or no. Poirot stood. She will not hang. The king's mercy for women poisoners is elastic. Broadmoor, perhaps. A lifetime with the shells. He walked the gravel path, cane marking time. At the gate he paused. One thing remains. He drew from his pocket the small brass casing, MC, and pressed it into Mrs. Croft's hand. For Clara, when they allow visitors. Tell her, the bullet that killed truly was the kindest. Her father kept it to remember mercy. Let her keep it to remember judgment. Mrs. Croft closed her fist around it. And the rose, sir? Poirot glanced back. The single bloom trembled in the wind. Leave it. Some secrets must stay rooted. He climbed into the Daimler. The engine turned over. Gravel crunched beneath the wheels. As they rounded the bend, Hargrove Manor shrank in the mirror. First a house, then a silhouette, then a memory. Jap lit a cigarette. Funny thing, Poirot. All that money, all those lies, and in the end a bastard daughter kills for £5,000 and a name she'll never use. Poirot gazed out at the passing hedgerows, bare and black. Non, mon ami. She killed for the name she was given in blood and denied in ink. The money was only the wound's salt. Silence settled between them, broken only by the rhythm of the wipers. At the railway station, Poirot alighted. Japp offered his hand. Back to London, then? Oui, to Whitehaven Mansions, to order, to tisane in the little grey cells. He smiled faintly. But first a telegram. He entered the post office, wrote in his neat, slanted hand. The rose blooms still. Your father saw you. Remember the mercy in the bullet. He paid, tipped his hat to the clerk, and stepped onto the platform. The London train steamed in, brakes hissing like a final confession. As it pulled away, Poirot took the window seat. He drew the cracked pearl button from his pocket, held it to the glass. Sunlight caught the fracture, splitting the light into a tiny rainbow. Le secret dévoilé, he whispered. The secret unveiled. And the curtain falls. The train gathered speed. Devon's hills rolled past, green and gold even in November. Somewhere behind, a single red rose kept its vigil over an empty house. A cracked button, and a secret finally laid to rest.